After being blessed with 2 slave girls, our hero Ryu continues his dominance by getting the feudal lords Alan and Ethan to serve under Princess Lupis in exchange for a handsome reward at the end of the upcoming war. This is a deal that's too good to be true, but both Ethan and Alan trust Ryu's better judgment. After all, he's just made them an offer they can't refuse. However, the night girl Maltina still wants to know why there is a need to not get involved with General Hadram. There are a lot of questions to be answered, but Sarah is unable to contain her excitement because of the giant vase that has been given to Ryu as a reward for his efforts. Sarah gets a bit too comfortable and goes on to say that it's a good thing she doesn't have to give up the vase to get the lords on her master's side. Of course, this leads to an awkward moment, but there's no harm done. Now, we move to the night time where a cute girl in a pretty dress meets Ryu alone in his room. Our hero is shocked to see her, but the dress gets his intrusive thoughts running, so he asks who she is. It turns out that the girl is actually Maltina, who has been forced to dress like an actual girl by Ryu's slave girls. Even Alan and Ethan wanted Maltina to look cute, so they told their maids to give her a spicy outfit. Maltina is upset with Ryu for not being able to recognize her, but our hero couldn't care less. Maltina wonders what Ryu is teaching his slave girls, because he could have shady intentions for them, but our hero turns it around on her and says sorry. He goes on to say that Rora and Sarah are like his family, so Maltina decides to change the topic before she gets too emotional. Anyway, she wants to discuss what just happened with the feudal lords. So she asks Ryu if he made this deal in order to create a third pillar of power by using the neutral parties. As a matter of fact, such a deal has been made before where a country is split into 3 groups. But Ryu reassures Maltina that they are not on such a level yet. After all, it's hard to figure out what General Hadram has in mind for the princess as well. We learn that he is the commander-in-chief of the chivalric order and has pledged his allegiance to Lupis, but you never know what his true intentions might be. It could be that General Hadram is simply showing support to the princess in order to gain full control of the military's authority, which will not be a good thing if he turns out to be evil. Ryu decides to use his brain power once again and says that Hadram might not be as obedient as the princess would like him to be, because the way she dealt with Mihail earlier was an indicator of some friction. Maltina agrees that even if they do win against the noble faction with General Hadram, they will still need to be careful. This was exactly the reason why Ryu decided to strike his deal with the feudal lords. And he even explains this to Alan, who assures him that he will gather all the neutral lords and have them commit to Princess Lupis. Despite such a successful mission, there are still a few missing pieces for our hero. He might have gotten around 2,000 soldiers from the feudal lords, but he will need another 2,000 soldiers from somewhere else. It's either this, or Ryu will need to get a general who is on the same level as Hadram. Lord Ethan takes this as his cue to enter, and he says that he has someone who fits into that description. Alan realizes who he's talking about and is quite happy about it, because the person is a cute girl named Alina, who was the previous commander-in-chief before Hadram. Ryu is interested now, so he asks if Alina is from a royal family. But Alan says that she's actually from common blood. Our hero is shocked to see the amount of respect that Alan and Ethan are showing to Alina, mainly because she comes from a common family and also the fact that she is a woman. Ethan explains that he and Alan value Alina because she has achieved a lot during her time in this world. She has great martial arts skills along with a strong sense of dignity, both of which have allowed her to rise from the rank of a commoner and attain the title of a general. However, after almost becoming a divine being, Alina abruptly announced her retirement and surprised everyone. Alan even goes on to say that getting Alina on their side will be like getting 1,000 soldiers. On top of that, if the other lords hear about Alina joining the princess, then they will also side with Lupis. However, Maltina brings up the fact that there is some kind of feud between Alina and General Hadram which could lead to some problems, especially since Hadram is currently serving Lupis. It might be hard for Alina to join forces with Ryu if he is with Hadram, so he asks if the feud has anything to do with Alina suddenly retiring out of the blue. Alan says that Ryu is right, and goes on to talk about a rumor that our hero would have definitely heard about if he was a citizen of this kingdom. It turns out that General Hadram had stolen Alina's position by force because he wanted to have all the power. In order to do this, he had taken her husband and daughter as his hostage, so that Alina would simply give in to his demands without a fight. It's a rather shocking twist. And now we go to the suburbs of Rhodes, Syria. This place happens to be Alina's home, and she is told by her maid that she has guests. Alina has not had any guests in a long time, so she is more than happy to meet with them. The guests turn out to be Ryu and Maltina, and Alina greets them with a smile. Maltina is nervous around her, but Ryu thinks that Alina is a frugal woman. Maltina decides to introduce herself and is quite shy as she mentions that she is the samurai knight girl of Princess Lupis. She bows down with intense passion and tells Alina that it is an honor for her to meet her. Alina is pleased by Maltina and her flattery, and then she moves on to Ryu. After he reveals his name, Alina becomes cautious because she has heard of his name before. Ryu wants to know how he's become so famous, and he gets his answer when Alina says that he has caught the princess's attention. Our hero is impressed to see how Alina has kept herself informed even after retiring from her post. He calls her the White God of War and goes on to praise her for remaining radiant even though she is not in service. Of course, Alina doesn't care for such titles because they are only useful in stroking one's ego. She takes a seat and asks the duo why they are here to see her today. Ryu does not waste any time and gets straight to the point by asking her to help Princess Lupis in the war. Alina's face changes its tone, so Maltina tells our hero not to be so sudden with his words. Alina confirms if Ryu is asking her to join the Knights faction because she is not keen on doing so. She doesn't hate the Knights, but she doesn't want to join Hadram in anything either. She even goes on to talk about the rumor regarding what Hadram had done with her husband and daughter, but this does not stop Ryu from working his magic. He tells Alina that he knows it all, which is why he is asking her to join the princess as her personal advisor. Alina becomes joyful and says that it would be a great honor for her to become the princess's guardian. However, since she was the knight of the late king, she is unable to accept this offer. Alina also brings up the point of the illegitimate child who might lay a claim to throne, but this only angers Maltina. She tries to convince Alina that Lupis is the only rightful heir to the throne and she can vouch for the princess because she is very close to her. Ryu doesn't want the knight girl to mess things up, so he tells her to calm down. After all, to be a king means that you should have a lot more than a simple personality. Maltina wonders whose side Ryu is on, so he puts her in her place by speaking facts. The truth of the matter is that Alina does not care about fame or legitimacy when it comes to the throne. Rather, it is about certain conditions that need to be in place for the White God of War to mark her return. Alina is impressed by our hero and she asks him to guess the conditions she is willing to work under. Maltina becomes a bit too excited upon hearing this, but Ryu can't have her messing up his plans, so he asks her to wait outside while he and Alina have a private chat with each other. The knight girl is not too keen to leave Ryu alone with Alina, but he reassures her that she can trust him. With that, Maltina leaves the room. And now it's up to Ryu to seal the deal with Alina. She tells him that he's quite gentle when compared to what she's heard about him. Ryu doesn't have time for silly games, so he tells Alina that she could have simply stated her conditions right at the start, but she didn't do this. It might be because she does not want the public to know of her conditions. And our hero has once again guessed it right. Alina is relieved to be able to speak openly now, so Ryu mentions the feud between her and General Hadram. He mentions the part where her husband and daughter were kidnapped by Hadram. But Alina reveals that this was just what the general public had been led to believe. The reality was that one day, Alina came home only to see her husband's head on the stairs, which means that he was ended by Hadram. Alina was shocked by this sight. And there was a letter as well, which said that the culprit has her daughter, and he will only let her go if Alina was to retire from being a night girl. This was obviously a horrific sight for Alina, but at the same time, she had no choice but to accept the condition. The worst part was that Alina came from a commoner family, which meant that she would normally have a lot of enemies. Ryu asks her if she had any evidence to prove what Hadram did, but she didn't want to take any risks, especially with her daughter's life on the line. With that thought in mind, she immediately retired from her knight position and searched for a while, but was only able to identify the culprit after a long time. Of course, this evil man turned out to be General Hadram, and now it all makes sense to Ryu. Alina says that Ryu has to promise her that he will take revenge on Hadram for her, and he agrees to it. Our hero goes to Maltina and reveals that Alina is now on their side, which makes her very happy. She knows that Princess Lupis will be very pleased to hear this, but something seems to be up with Ryu. Maltina asks him if there's a problem because he has a very sad look on his face. He says that Alina might have agreed to team up with him and the princess, but he has learned something horrible from her. It turns out that he had asked Alina if her daughter was doing well, but she went on to reveal that it didn't end well for her. One of Alina's assistants managed to get some information on her daughter, but learned that she was sold as a slave to some shady men. After some horrible experiences, she was disposed of in the worst possible way. This was truly devastating for our hero to hear, which is why he looks so sad right now. As he leaves the mansion with Maltina, Alina looks at him from her window and says that he's quite a lovely young man. Her maid feels that Ryu looks a lot older than his age. But that's not the point here. Our hero could not hold back his tears after learning what happened to Alina's poor daughter, so she can sense that he is truly a noble man. On top of that, his energy gives off the vibe that he is filled with strength and kindness, so he will make sure to avenge Alina. The White God of War even goes on to say that Ryu is the lamp who will finally light up her soul from the depths of despair. Our hero is going to be the man who will bring justice to Alina, no matter what the cost may be. Ryu decides to call back on the memory of his sensei telling him about the Chinese emperor, Li Kuangyi. We even see a chapter from his life where he is talking to one of his men about using their regular soldiers to conquer a new enemy. General Lee was known very well for his ability to capture and defeat troops even when he was using weak men, so it made him a legend in the modern world. Ryu is now reading the war script from the Song Dynasty in its original text, so he wonders if it truly is a privilege to be summoned into this fantasy world. Suddenly, he is interrupted when Rora asks him if he's done with his reading. We see that Ryu was resting his head on Rora's lap and he was so comfortable in her thick thighs that he had forgotten she is not his pillow. Our hero says sorry for letting his intrusive thoughts take over, but Rora is fine with this. As a matter of fact, it is her duty as his slave to offer him comfort whenever he needs it. Of course, it only awakens Ryu's shady side, so we switch to the well outside where Rora is now collecting some water. She thinks about what her master said because he had apologized even though he is free to use her as he pleases. Rora starts to have a fantasy in her head, but then she suddenly gets scared by Leone as part of a prank. The lion girl goes on to mock Rora for being so occupied that her back was full of openings for an attack. Rora blushes and says that it's not nice to sneak up on her like this, but Leone says that she couldn't help herself since the slave girl was in some fantasy land. Leone is actually interested in Ryu, so she asks where he might be. Rora says that her master has gone to talk with the mercenaries about some plan of his, but Leone doesn't want to be a part of that chat. Rora is shocked to hear this, but Leone says that she is the one who brought the mercenaries, so she will leave the talking to Balls. Rora gets what she means, and thanks the lion girl for getting so many people, even when she did not have the means to communicate with them. Leone says that she has a lot of people in her network, so it was not hard for her to get the job done. Of course, the truth is that Princess Lupis has to win the war at any cost, so this is the best that Leone can do for Ryu. She is not equipped to do a lot of talking, which is why she has chosen to stay out of the discussion. The lion girl then jokes about the knights complaining, since their training ground has now been taken over by the mercenaries. Now, Leone asks Rora for her better half, so she assumes it's her master. She says that Ryu might also be looking for books covering topics from other worlds. But if it's Sarah that Leone is talking about, then she has gone to run some errands. Leone worries that Sarah should not be left alone, because she could end up doing hilarious things if she is not attended to. However, Rora is sure that her sister can handle herself with some simple chores. After all, she believes that Sarah is a lot more proper than she is. Leone takes this as a chance to joke with Rora, so asks her if she is free and jobless. The slave girl gets upset upon hearing this, so she shows Leone that she's getting water even as they're speaking. However, Leone is surprised to see this because Rora is a battle slave. She can simply ask others to do this job for her, so the lion girl wants to know why Rora is putting in the effort. She goes on to explain that since she is the slave of a man like Ryu, she is able to cope with any request to the best of her abilities. Leone wonders if our hero had ordered Rora to do this for him, but she says no. The lion girl was expecting a response like this because Ryu is not the type of boy to make his slave girls do so much work. Rora goes on to say that her master is very kind and gentle to her and Sarah, although he is absolutely ruthless when it comes to the enemy. Leone agrees that Ryu is a gentle boy, especially when it comes to his cute slave girls. This makes Rora blush, so she tries to hide her feelings, but Leone is able to spot that the slave girl has already noticed why her master is so nice to her. Of course, Rora does not want Leone to say such weird things because it makes her shy, but the lion girl says that it's nice to be young and have such a handsome master. She feels jealous of Rora and Sarah, but the slave girl says that it's not as rosy as it seems. Leone doesn't follow what she's saying, so Rora explains that it's hard for her to deal with Ryu's behavior. She even goes on to say that her master doesn't trust her or Sarah, which is why he is so nice to them. Rora has tears in her eyes, so Leone consoles her since she was the one who was teasing her in the first place. Things get a bit weird when Rora says that she wants her master to treat her like a naughty cow. Leone has no idea what this means. But there's another problem to deal with as Sarah has come back from her chores. She sees her sister crying and it makes her angry beyond comprehension. Leone panics and tries to defend herself by saying it was a simple case of misunderstanding. But Rora is surprised to see Sarah like this. She asks if something is wrong, and that's when Sarah remembers why she came here. She goes on to say that Ryu is in danger of meeting his end, which shocks both Rora as well as Leone. It's at this very moment that we get to see Ryu facing off against an overpowered fighter who is using all his strength to fight him. The fighter uses his finisher move and Ryu is luckily able to dodge it because the move ends up splitting the ground open like a spider web. The other mercenaries are in shock and disbelief to see such power, but we learn from Sarah that this man is a rank-A mercenary who is also an expert in martial arts. The fighter tells our hero that he does not want to attack him in his sleep, so it's good that they're fighting in public right now. He basically wants to duel with Ryu, but the girls are not able to understand why he would want to do such a thing. Rora panics for her master, but Leone reminds her that Ryu is an amazing fighter too, so she should not worry so much for him. Both Rora and Sarah act cute and say that they don't want anything to happen to their sweet master, so Leone gets that they are being emotional. The girls pray for Ryu's safety, and then we see the rank fighter taunting our hero for not being able to use magic. He goes on a rampage while the others watch on with anxious anticipation. The fighter continues to mock Ryu for not being able to do anything without his slave girls, especially because he is a rank F adventurer. The fighter uses another finisher move to tear the ground open, but Ryu is able to dodge it with ease. Our hero does not get scared so easily, as he tells the fighter that his martial arts style is just flashy without any substance. The fighter tells Ryu not to complain too much about him, but our hero explains that he's not using his skills the right way. This takes the fighter by surprise, especially when Ryu tells him that he's wasting his martial arts by focusing too much on power. It's time for our hero to do the teasing as he makes fun of the fighter's nickname by calling him a crying baby. He messes up the name one more time and it triggers the fighter into charging at him. Of course, this is what Ryu wanted in the first place, and he makes use of this advantage by deflecting the fighter's attack. He then proceeds to grab his body and smash him to the ground with complete ease, much to the shock of everyone watching the duel. They are unable to believe what they have just seen, and even the rank fighter can't move from his position due to the sheer skill of his opponent. Ryu acts cool about the whole thing and simply says that what he has used is a simple technique that he had learnt back when he was in Japan. Rora and Sarah come to the scene and call out to their master, but the slave girls are stopped by Balls. They ask him to let them through, but he says that he can't do this since there is a duel going on between two warriors. The crowd goes wild from behind, so Balls says that he can't give special treatment to the slave girls. Leone shows up from behind and says sorry to Balls for not being able to keep Rora and Sarah in check. This shocks the slave girls because they had no idea that Leone knew about the duel. Anyway, it's time to go back to the fight, and we see the rank warrior finally being able to get up. He is impressed that Ryu was able to use such a neat technique, but mentions that he also has a few tricks up his sleeve. Our hero doesn't care for words, so he tells the fighter to prove it with his actions. With that, the fighter strikes a pose, and Ryu is able to identify it as the pine needle stance. The fighter mocks Ryu by saying he is now using a move from another world, and that too, the fighting style happens to be karate. The rank warrior tells our hero that he is now able to copy his moves, so Rora and Sarah begin to worry for him. Ryu realizes that his slave girls are watching, so he decides to put on a show for them. Of course, he is also offended by the fact that he and his sensei are being compared with a basic fighter, so he tells him to know his place. As expected, this riles up the fighter, so he lashes out at Ryu with all his might. This makes no difference at all to our hero, as he manages to counter him with ease and even goes on to put up a splendid display of martial arts. The crowd is in absolute disbelief as Ryu lifts the warrior once again and slams him to the ground as if he's a puny insect. Such a move even makes Balls applaud our hero. And with his finisher move, Ryu is announced as the winner of the duel. Everyone in the crowd goes crazy for him, but our hero tells Balls that he might have ended the rank of warrior. He asks him to take care of his opponent, but then he also has to deal with his slave girls, both of whom are looking at him with disdain. They want to know the meaning of this, so Ryu says sorry for leading them on. He reveals that he had received some intel on an assassin from the nobles mixing in with the mercenaries as a spy. Our hero figured that it would be best to defeat him in a duel, so he had Leone set up the whole thing. Of course, the lion girl was more than happy to do this, because she has made a lot of money in the process. She is a smart woman for sure, but it's also a good thing for Ryu to have beaten such a strong assassin. However, the problem here is that Rora and Sarah are upset because they wanted to get rid of the assassin for their master. Ryu knew they would say something like that, which was why he decided to keep it a secret from them in the first place. Leone adds that this was the best way to establish dominance amongst the other mercenaries. After all, now that Ryu has beaten the rank fighter, everyone is talking about him. The lion girl then tells Rora that she needs to trust her master because he is way more powerful than she can ever imagine. The slave girl looks at Ryu as he chills with the other people, and she has dreamy eyes. Since she had said all those weird things about wanting to be treated like a naughty cow, Rora says sorry to Leone for creeping her out. The lion girl is fine with it, and even promises to keep that as a secret between the girls. Rora is still feeling bad, so Leone decides to tell her a secret about her master. She says that Ryu had made a resolution that he wants both Rora and Sarah to lead happy lives even if he is no more. He has said this way too many times to Leone, and has even mentioned that he does not want to use the girls as an excuse for him to have an easy life. Our hero sees the lion girl talking to his slave girls, so he tells her not to reveal any secrets. Leone then tells Rora and Sarah that they are both loved by their master, so they should be happy. However, Rora tells Leone that she should not lie because after all both Rora and Sarah are slaves, so they don't need to be loved. The lion girl doesn't understand this logic, but then she and Rora are cut short by Ryu when he reminds them that it's time for the war to start. He calls Rora over to his side, and she happily follows after him because she will do whatever he wants her to. Now, it's time for us to move to a very important person for some context. We see a young girl who tells us that she was an orphan, but due to the events on one certain day, she has become a princess. This girl's name is Radine, and it looks like she is the illegitimate child of the late king. However, Radine herself would like to know who she is, especially as we see her being surrounded by some noble. The truth of the matter is that the kingdom is going to start a war just because of her. Now, we go back to the royal castle where we see a knight boy bowing down to Alina. He says that his grandpa Frank was very concerned about Alina, especially after the horrible losses she had to endure. This is why he has come here to offer himself as her new guardian knight. Ryu does not know who this man is, so he asks Alina for some content. She explains that the knight boy is the grandchild of a man named Frank Morrigan, who was her assistant knight back when she was the White God of War. The knight boy is also from a commoner family, just like Alina, which is why she relates to him. The knight boy is so skilled that even Alina would not be able to defeat him in her current form. There's also the fact that the knight boy is handsome, so she makes it known to Ryu, who really doesn't have much to say about it. Now, we see the feudal lords Alan and Ethan, both of whom reveal that the news of Alina joining the princess has had a good effect on our hero's team. A lot of the neutral lords are now keen on serving Lupies, so Alan and Ethan have become busy with all the requests that are coming their way. Alan even believes that some of the people working under Hadram might just flip over and serve under Alina directly rather than the general. He then jokes about being referred by Alina, whereas it is actually Ethan who has received that honor. The feudal lords joke with each other, but the White God of War is not impressed. On top of that, Ryu did not expect so many people to join his side, which is actually a problem. After all, General Hadram is still commanding his army for the princess, so he would not want it to become so big that it affects the overall plan. There are a lot of things being said about Hadram, and none of them are nice. He is known to be cruel and narrow in his thought, which means that he was never popular from the start. Our hero fears that these rising numbers might push Hadram into action, but nothing can be done about it now. Since the army strength can't be reduced, Ryu has to take matters into his own hands. After all, the arrangement is for everyone to be treated as Imperial Guards, so they are not like a regular army. Another big difference between Ryu's army and General Hadram is the severe lack of funds from our hero's side. Now, Maltina rushes into the room with some very bad news. The men in the room want to know what has happened, and that's when she reveals that General Hadram has now joined the nobles faction. It is a rather surprising turn of events and comes as a huge shock to everyone, especially Alan and Ethan. The feudal lords can't make sense of this situation because Hadram and Val have bad blood between them. Maltina doesn't have an answer for that, but she does know that Hadram's army has set foot into the nobles faction. Mihail wonders if this is just an exercise to assess the bandits around the area, but the night girl confirms that the troops just randomly joined the noble faction without any hesitation. Mihail gets upset because it is clear that Hadram has betrayed them all. Mihail was the one who worried that using the main army for this task was a huge risk, and now his worst fears have come true. He is angry with Hadram for being so shameless, but Alina tells him that it can't be helped. After all, General Hadram is a great fighter, and would always pull out the most effective moves to win. There's not much that can be done about this, so the White God of War suggests holding a war council in front of Lupies the next morning. Ryu is also affected by this news, and it makes him think about a similar situation that had happened in Earth's history. He feels that the current scene is like when Emperors Sun Quan and Cao Cao have joined forces right before the Battle of Red Cliff. The fact that Val from the Noble faction and Hadram from the Knight faction have joined forces just seems too good to be true, especially with the timing. On top of that, how are these people going to feed so many soldiers? This gets Ryu thinking, and he uses his brain power to come up with the theory that there could be a third pillar who is pulling all the strings behind the scenes. Alina is amazed by our hero's intellect and she applauds him for being so quick on the uptake. As a matter of fact, she is quite calm in this scenario, but that should be expected from someone who has such a legacy. She simply says that she will go when her time will come, and she feels that it's going to come soon, so there's no need to worry about it for now. Ryu jokes with her because it would be quite an issue if Alina were to be ended at such a crucial time. Even so, Alina says that the current situation is not good for them at all. She wonders if this is going to be a drawn-out war, because she would want to solve their logistics problem. It can actually be sorted if they just raid Hadram's supplies, and Ryu agrees with her. He also feels that a drawn-out war would not be the worst thing for them, but there is something that frightens him the most. Alina tries to complete his sentence by saying she could pass away tomorrow due to natural causes. However, that is not at all what Ryu would want to say. He asks her to cut him some slack because his actual fear is if Alina were to abandon him in the middle of the war. The white god of war simply jokes and says that she doesn't like men who give her false hope. Ryu asks Alina to promise him one thing if they win this war, but we don't get to hear what he asks for. Now, we move to the next day as a war council is being held in front of Princess Lupi's. Our hero suggests using the mercenaries to attack the enemy forces, but Maltina gets angry and asks him if he's lost his mind. She says that they're up against 60,000 soldiers, and if they count Hadraim's men as well, then it's not looking good for them at all. However, Ryu tells her to calm down, because there is no need to assume that they will be taking on the whole army by themselves. Basically, Ryu is planning to build a bridgehead over on the river Thebe, and Mihail sees the merit in it. Even though Val and Hadraim joining forces has become a huge headache for our hero, since they still have bad blood between them, it will not be easy for them to work together. The team can make use of this advantage and build a fortress on the front line, since the enemy will need to cross the river to get to this side. The princess's army can set up the fortress there. If they can use the terrain well, then the fortress will also be indestructible. Mihail is extremely impressed by Ryu's genius plan, so he commends him for it. But our hero is actually impressed with Mihail for being able to understand his plan. After all, he had just assumed that Mihail would be a muscle brain man with no intelligence. However, he was wrong, so he tells Mihail that he's got it right. Even Alina thinks that the plan is very interesting. But she has a concern. She wants to know how Ryu is going to build the fortress in the first place. Even if the enemy forces are not in order, they will still do their best to make sure our hero won't be able to succeed in his strategy. Of course, Ryu already has another plan of action in place, so he asks Princess Lupi's for her permission to carry it out. She becomes a bit shy after hearing this, because she has no idea how to fight a war. The princess doesn't want so much pressure on her, so she decides to leave it all on Alina's hands. The white god of war is shocked by this, but not because of Lupi's, but rather because of Ryu. It seems as if our hero had already expected that the princess would hand over the command to Alina, which could have been the main reason why he got her over to his side. She has no choice but to tell the princess that Ryu has an amazing plan. She approves of it. At the same time, Alina tells Ryu not to get it twisted, because her decision is not based on whether she likes him or not. Basically, the reason this plan works for the kingdom is that even if it goes wrong, then the loss will only be Ryu's mercenary soldiers and no one else. She tells our hero to be careful and not to lose his life, so he smiles back at her and says he's going to succeed. Even though Alina appears to be strict, she does commend Ryu on having guts made of steel. Later, Ryu has a word with Leone and Balls regarding the plan, and the lion girl teases him by saying he loves to take risks. Balls does have a concern, which is that the soldiers will not be able to defend themselves from the enemy. There doesn't seem to be any plan in place for that, but Ryu says that he will need help to handle that department, specifically from Leone and Balls. We don't get to see what plan he has in mind, because now he is meeting with Rora and he comes across a new headache. The arrangements have been completed for the mercenary soldiers, but Rora suspects that there are some more rogues hiding in plain sight. This is just like the rank fighter from earlier, but this time there could be more than one spy. Rora doesn't know if these spies are strong enough to be assassins, so she suggests get rid of all of them. However, Ryu tells her to just let them swim around for now, because he might be able to use them as a trump card later on. He even thinks about doing some scam with them, but Balls worries that the spies could just attack Ryu while he's asleep. Our hero says that he's too strong to go in such a basic way, because he was trained by his sensei after all. Leone takes this as a chance to let her own intrusive thoughts take over, and she suggests that she should share a bed with our hero to ensure he is safe. Of course, she has her own shady intentions in mind, so the slave girls activate the dark side and tell her that there is no need to share a bed with their master. It's a funny situation that puts a smile on Ryu's face, but he knows that he has a huge task ahead of him. Now, we move to outside the royal capital of Xerius, where a strong army comes together. Leading this army is none other than our hero Ryu and his trusted companions. Everyone looks at Ryu as their new leader and place their complete faith in him. With that, our hero is ready to begin his plan of action, so he orders the army to begin with the plan. A few days pass by, after which Ryu and his army finally reach the southwest shore of the Thebe River. They kick off the fortress building exercise, and Mihail tells Ryu that he will lead his men to scout the area for any dangers. Our hero is fine with this, but he tells Mihail that he should retreat instantly if he sees any of the enemy forces. He knows that Mihail is a man of passion, so he asks him to only scout the area and do nothing else. Mihail agrees to restrict his activities to just that, and then he takes off with his men. Our hero realizes that Mihail has given him a lot of respect as the commander of the army, even though he is just a commoner boy. It makes him feel very happy because Mihail is showing the dignity of a knight who only wishes to protect his king. With that, he tells everyone else to continue with the preparations just as they had planned. It looks like a tiring mission, but Ryu doesn't back down from his duties, and neither do his men. Balls takes over some of the men as he reads out some orders to the first squad who will be using a magic spell. He reminds the men to chant their spells just like they were told, so that there won't be any trouble. The men have a strong look of intensity in their eyes as they begin chanting the spell with passion. They finally complete the process and launch an earth sync move. The ground moves instantly, and Balls is pleased with the way the first squad has done their duty. He allows them to rest for 15 minutes, and then he calls out the second squad to use their magic for the next round. Ryu shows up to ask Balls how the construction is going on, and he tells our hero that everything is going as per the schedule. Ryu is pleased to hear this, and he applauds Balls for doing his job so well. He asks him to continue just like this, but even Balls tells Ryu that he is an amazing man. This is because the Earth Sync magic spell is considered to be a useless trick that is only good for digging things. Since it is so easy to use, most people consider it to be litter trash. However, Ryu has been able to use such a simple spell in such an effective manner, that too, for a war. Of course, there's nothing special about the spell in general, because it can't be used to attack a moving enemy. Also, the spell can be nullified with magic items, so it really was a stroke of genius for Ryu to use it first. Our hero says that he has to make the best possible use of the spell, so Balls make an odd expression on his face. Ryu wants to know what's the matter, but he says it's nothing important. He basically feels that our hero has not understood how valuable he really is. Anyway, Ryu has another urgent matter to deal with, so he asks Balls for the identification of a suspected spy. He confirms the same, because Sarah has been keeping a watch on this spy for a while, so Ryu needs to act fast. He's a bit shocked to learn that the spy is a cute girl, but he also feels a bit uneasy, probably because she reminds him of Sato from earlier. He wonders if this spy girl is from Shaldana's empire, but then he suspects something even more bizarre. Meanwhile, we check out Mihail and his men, who have laid their eyes on the enemy soldiers. There is no movement as of now, but the number of soldiers on the opposite side is believed to be around 5,000, with at least 2,000 being cavalrymen. Mihail is a bit worried because that's a lot of men to deal with. There might also be scouts from the enemy forces, so it's highly possible that General Hadram and the nobles are now aware of Ryu's plan to cross the river. The night boy from earlier panics upon hearing this, so he tells Mihail that they need to report back to Ryu as soon as possible. Mihail tells the night boy that he's doing well as a new guy, and now he plans to retreat from the scene with his men. However, it's at this very moment when one of the soldiers panics upon seeing someone in the enemy forces. Mikhail wants to know what's up, but the soldier is unable to express himself. Mikhail doesn't have time to play games, so he asks the soldier to hand over the viewing scope. However, what he sees through the scope is rather unpleasant, as it is a man named Kyle who has joined the noble faction. It looks like Kyle was on the princess's side earlier, but he has now betrayed her and joined the enemy. As expected, Mihail does not take too kindly to this and openly calls him a traitor. The other knights don't know what to do in this situation, because this is clearly big news. The night boy asks Mihail for the next plan of action, so he says that the others should retreat and report back to Ryu. However, as far as Mihail is concerned, he is going to pull out his sword and attack Kyle without mercy. Of course, this comes as a shock to the others, because this was not part of the plan. They don't want to leave their captain alone, but Mihail says that there's not much for them to do here. He simply says that he will take care of Kyle, because the traitor deserves to be punished for his crimes. The other knights are ordered to go back to Ryu, because he will need to know about this as soon as possible. With that, Mihail charges towards the enemy, even as his knights try to stop him from making such a huge mistake. Now, we move back to the site of construction, where Ryu is looking over everything. Suddenly, he becomes alert, so Rora asks him if all is well. Ryu reassures her that nothing is wrong, and he was just thinking about how far along they've come. With the fortress almost ready and good to go, our hero feels that they need to hurry up with the construction so that they can carry on with the rest of their plans. However, before he can move further, he hears cries of help from Balls. He looks rather worried, so Ryu asks him what's the matter. Someone has brought a message to the camp, so our hero wants to know what it is. Balls feels that it would be better for Ryu to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. And then we see one of the night boys from Mihail's team. He is visibly tired and isn't looking too good, so Ryu wonders what has happened. He asks the night boy if he was serving under Mihail, and he confirms it, but with bad news. The night boy isn't able to stand straight, so Ryu orders him to keep it together. Our hero wants to know why only one boy has come back when Mihail had left with multiple soldiers for his scouting mission. The night boy agrees that he had gone with his leader as a team, but he is the only one who has made it back alive. Both Ryu and Balls can't believe what they're hearing, so the night boy explains that Mihail might have been taken down by the enemy. What's worse is that the other knights followed after him, and they have most likely been dealt with the same fate. Balls wants to confirm each and every word that the survivor is saying. because he wants to know if Mihail has actually been ended. The night boy says that Mihail could not control himself after seeing Kyle, so he charged at him with lethal intent. Ryu has no idea who Kyle is, so he asks for more context, but all the soldiers behind him seem to know that name, and even they start calling him a traitor. It makes Ryu wonder if Kyle is actually related to the knights. But there's no time to lose, so Balls asks the night boy for the number of enemy soldiers. He answers by saying that there are around 5,000 soldiers, but the number of purging warriors is still unknown. There is a lot to take in right now, but Ryu can't afford to lose any time. He quickly calls out to Leone and Balls and tells them to take 400 soldiers each. The plan is to have them guard the north and the south sides of the fortress, while Ryu will take center stage and guard the core with 600 soldiers. Balls and Leone are good to go, but the night boy asks our hero to forgive him because he and his men ended up going against his orders. Ryu doesn't want the night boy to feel bad, so he says that it wasn't his fault. After all, Mihail was the one who had given the order, so it was his fault. However, the night boy still feels bad about what happened because they were actually going to retreat till Mihail saw Kyle. This caused him to lose his temper as well as his mind, which is why our hero finds himself in a tricky spot right now. On top of that, the night boy feels that he should have tried to stop Mihail from making such a careless mistake, but instead, he chose to go with him and get wounded. He is ready to lay down his life for Princess Lupi's, as was Mihail, but at the end of the day, nothing good has come from betraying Ryu's orders. Things become a little emotional now, because the night boy is taking his last few breaths at this point. He says that he always wanted to be like Mihail, but the chance has gone by with the fatal blow that was dealt to him. He takes out his medal and laments that he only has one of these, and it's going to stay that way during this life. Of course, Ryu doesn't get any of this, because it is not normal for someone to be thinking about medals when their life is about to end. Rora also becomes emotional as the night boy drops to the ground, pretty much facing his end. Ryu notices that there was no coherence between what he revealed earlier and what he said before passing away, so it feels like a wasted chance. The night boy's last words ask our hero to save Princess Lupi's and make her the rightful ruler of Rhodes, Syria. He forces Ryu to make this promise to him, after which he breathes his last, and it makes our hero very emotional. He calls out to Balls and asks him for a spade to dig a hole in the ground. Balls is surprised to hear this, because the same thing can be done with an earth sink spell. However, Ryu says that he wants to dig a grave for the night boy in order to pay his last respects. After all, this man was one of his comrades, so he deserves that much at the very least. Of course, Ryu also has to take his position with Rora, but he asks her for some time so that he can get this done. She has no problem with this, and even Balls is amazed to see how kind Ryu is as a leader. The grave gets dug, and then our hero thinks about what the knight told him regarding the promise to make Princess Lupi's the ruler of the kingdom. He then takes a look at the medal that the night boy was talking about, and wonders why he would bring that up during such a difficult time. However, he needs to get to work as soon as possible, because Rora has spotted the enemy soldiers coming in fast. The worst part is that there are 5,000 of these soldiers, and they're just within a kilometer of the fortress. It looks like a deadly war is going to begin, and Ryu needs to lead the way for his slave girls and the other soldiers as well. He proceeds to draw his sword and heads towards the battlefield, thinking about making good on his promise to the night boy. Of course, he will have to survive this attack if he can make that a reality. What's next for our hero? Will he be able to defeat so many soldiers and lead the way for his people? Or will his amazing plan turn out to be a failure? Like, share, and subscribe to find out in the next video. Hit the bell icon to get notified when I upload part 5. See you soon.